Donald Trump is having a pretty rough week. I mean, body riddled with COVID-19 to such a degree. Get me to the hospital. Get me to the hospital. We must get the president to the hospital. Secret Service agents who take a bullet for the president. Maybe not Trump, but typically, usually, ideally, at least for their job, they would for Reagan. Don't know about for Trump, but maybe they take their job seriously. Jump into the car with the president, who is basically a loaded weapon in and of himself. Again, body riddled with COVID. Get him to the hospital. He's embarrassed. He's utterly and entirely embarrassed. They fill that president's body up with all sorts of experimental drugs and steroids, enough to get him up and at him, and he goes out back to work with staff that is pissed off because that staff doesn't know how long he had been infected. And he had walking around, talking, running in his mouth, yelling, etc. Meaning the White House, Washington, D.C. has become a super spreader at this point and have become infected, a cesspool, as somebody have called it, literally and figuratively. And yet Trump is there, raging out on Twitter, attacking Facebook and Twitter, attacking Article 230, making the point of saying he's not going to go to the negotiation table anymore, basically dropping the stock market. Jerome Powell screaming and begging for money. We need money. Give people money. Trump, I'm not going to touch it. And understand what this means. 30 million people out of a job, and the president of the United States has just said he is no longer going to negotiate because the Democratic Party wants to give $2.2 trillion or $2.4 trillion, depending on Trump or the last bill that they passed. And Trump wants to give $1.6. And the American public is not worth $1 trillion. Differential. I think it's like 0.8 trillion, but whatever. You get my point. How do you give trillions to oligarchs? And then you turn around with the American public is reeling. The public that makes this country go. Because regardless of what you want to say about the oligarchs, at the end of the day, there's somebody who has to man Jeff Bezos stores or Walmart stores. There are people who have to bag those groceries and take those groceries out to the car. There are people who have to man those checkout lines or man those fast food lines. People make this world go, not oligarchs. In the same way that kings and queens were eventually realized to be bereft of necessity. Same thing with these oligarchs. The people themselves can run their businesses and their affairs, and that money, instead of being accrued and sucked to the top, 95% of the gains under Obama, that number is going to be monstrously higher under Trump. It can only be like 5%, right? Instead of us getting our ends, it goes to them. That needs to stop. But side point, and a bit of a tangent. My point is, Donald Trump has not been having a good day. And that day just got a little bit worse. A Manhattan district attorney can get his hands on Trump's tax returns now. Now, basically, Trump lost in appeals court. And as I was reading through the merits of this case, it's a good thing that Trump is going to be able to put his person on the Supreme Court, because as this goes to the Supreme Court, he is going to need his person to influence this case, to kill this case. Because any fair, honest accounting of this, Trump's taxes would be theirs by now. The reason why I say that is because the arguments that Trump makes don't necessarily apply, and that's why he keeps losing these. Or that's why he's losing this. And basically, he even went so far as to the judge say, you can argue on these grounds. He says, okay, he argued on those explicit grounds, but the grounds didn't necessarily apply. I'm going to go through it just to make it plain. But basically, Trump goes to the appeals court, loses. And most likely this case is going to go to the Supreme Court. The DA wants to get his hands on Trump's corporate and his personal taxes. And he wants to basically investigate those taxes in a criminal inquiry to see if Trump committed crimes. This is the article. Okay, that's monstrously too big. I'm sorry. Let's try to make that a little bit smaller. There we are. This is the New York Times. Now, the part in this, and just to repart, the Manhattan District Attorney can enforce a subpoena seeking Donald Trump's personal and corporate tax returns. A federal appeals panel ruled on Wednesday, dealing yet another blow to the president's year-long battle to keep his financial records out of the hands of state prosecutors. Now, right here. Mr. Vance does not reveal the scope of the office's criminal inquiry, citing grand jury secrecy, but prosecutors have suggested to court papers that they are looking for a range of potential crimes, including tax and insurance fraud and falsification of business records. They have said that tax records are central to the investigation. The president's argument against the subpoena hinged on a central assertion that Mr. Vance's entire investigation was focused on lush money payments made in the final days of the 2016 presidential campaign to two women who said they had affairs with Trump. The payments were arranged by Michael Cohen, Mr. Trump's fixer and personal lawyer. Now, the scope of the subpoena, the president's lawyer argued, was far too wide for such a tailored inquiry. The judge dismissed that argument. The president's bare assertion that the scope of the grand jury's inquiry is limited only to certain payments made by Michael Cohen in 2016 amounts to nothing more than implausible speculation. Without the benefit of a linchpin assumption, all other allegations of overbreadth, they wrote, falls short. Trump is trying to basically say, look, this is overreach. He's going too far in the scope of what he was supposed to look into. This is not an argument of I'm innocent. This is more so an argument that the person has no right to peek. The officer opens the car door, finds a bag of weed. I get in court. I don't argue that that's not a bag of weed. I argue that the cop had no right to search my car in the first place. Now, the judge may say, you're right. Without any rationale or reason, the speeding ticket didn't necessarily deserve you being pulled out of your car. Agreed. We're going to toss the suit. But in this case, the judge says, no. That cop smelled that bag of weed because that bag of weed was open. And so that cop can legitimately go into your car and take a peek in regards to what's there. Keep going. Mr. Trump has tried several arguments, first asserting last year that a sitting president was immune to criminal investigation. That question, which had never been tested in courts, eventually ended up in the Supreme Court. In July, the justices issued a landmark decision rejecting the president's immunity claim, but saying he could challenge the subpoena on other grounds such as scope and relevance. Mr. Trump did just that. After losing again in lower courts in August, the president appealed to the U.S. Appeals Court for the Second Circuit, which typically hears cases before 3-judge panels. And of course, this was the one that he lost. He has been trying to keep his tax returns a secret. The DA has been trying to get his hands on those returns. And whether a president can be prosecuted or not, apparently the judge was like, no, a president can be investigated. Can a president be prosecuted and taken to jail? Is a separate question. Not one that was answered, but I guess I'm making the point that, yes, the president can be investigated. And if Trump loses this election, the question of whether a president can be prosecuted is moot. He's fair game. One of the other interesting things is that the DA is given leeway. meaning he understands that Trump is going to appeal this to the Supreme Court. So he basically said, look, I give you, I think they said 11 days. Let me nail that down to make sure I'm right. But basically, they're giving you 11 days to make that appeal, since it's already assumed it's going to appeal. Here's another point. The unanimous ruling of the 3-judge panel in New York rejected the president's argument by the subpoena should be blocked because it was too broad and amounted to political harassment from Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance, a Democrat. Grand juries must necessarily paint with a broad brush, the judges wrote. They concluded that the president did not show that Mr. Vance had been driven by politics. None of the president's allegations taken together are separately sufficient to raise plausible inference that the subpoena was issued out of malice and intent to harass. Now, let's be honest. Let's be honest. If Vance gets his hands on Trump's taxes and he finds out that there were shenanigans afoot, it may be true that Trump is guilty. It also may be true that Vance has a, let's say, extra incentive to be extra intense because he's a Democrat. He hates Vance. I mean, as a Democrat, I would imagine he hates Trump as much as any other Democrat that's rabid. Rabid. Can't sleep at night rabid. Clenching their teeth, grinding their fingernails into walls rabid. And so when he gets up in the morning, I bet he thinks he is doing God's work. He probably feels fantastic. He has the things that he needs in regards to his resources, but he also has a purpose. Get Trump. What did Rashid Tlaib say? We're gonna impeach that motherfucker. Vance probably says, I'm gonna lock that motherfucker up. Does it entirely influence his reasons for going after Trump? Meaning, I'm saying both things can be true. The cop can pull me over. He can be racist. He also can smell weed in the car. And he can open that car and get that weed out. I'm saying that two things can be true at once. The catch here is that the judge can't necessarily say that just because the guy is a Democrat, that case is not valid. That case can be infinitely valid, and that guy can entirely also have a political motive in going after Trump. Both things can be true. And whether the political motive is leading or not, I would imagine that it helps him get up in the morning, gives a pep in his step as he goes about this. The Supreme Court is the wild card because, again, they're more Republicans. And when Trump puts his person on, there's going to be even more still. I think at this point, it's 4-4. So this could be a deadlock, depending on when it goes. The catch is, just because the Supreme Court hears it, the catch is, the 4-4 split is a little weird. And Trump, just like he lost the last case with the conservative Supreme Court, he may also lose this one. We will see. And if he does lose this one, and that DA does get his hands on Trump's taxes, oh my God. Oh my God. Like, share, and subscribe. Google is fucking me. Like, it's not changing. It's not changing the name of the tabs. So when I go into a video, the tab goes back and reverts to the last one. It's not accepting the change. But nevertheless, I'll change the name of the video. But I'm going to say like, share, and subscribe. Thanks all.